What's up, my know-it-alls? It is definitely that time again. That means it's Wednesday morning and we're talking The Mandalorian, Season 3, Episode 3, Chapter 19. Here we go, The Convert. Okay, I'm not gonna bury the lead here. The know-it-all index is probably gonna be a little bit lower than normal today, not because the episode's bad. This is what's called the bridge episode. You guys know all about this. Anybody who watches me for any amount of time knows a bridge episode is an episode that gets you from A to B. Now, those are normally bad. By that I mean your average writer doesn't exactly make it entertaining because they're just trying to get to their main goal. Meaning to most writers, you have the bridge episode, which is literally only designed to get you to the next episode, because the next episode is where their real heart and soul is, okay? Most people think a bridge episode is just about getting you to your final destination, but the truth is you're a really good, well-done bridge episode gets you there, is worried about how you got there. When you go into this episode, the episode starts with us completely where we left off at the waterside. Grogu's looking over Djarin, and as he wakes up, they're like, all right, we got it, well, let's get going. And from this moment forward, she doesn't take her helmet off. That's gonna become important later. So as you go through the episode, the opening of the episode rather, they get all, I say dressed up. They get back in the Bo-Katan ship. They're gonna head back because ultimately that's where they're gonna find where they're gonna get where they're gonna go. They get to her planet, meaning not obviously they're on Mandalore proper right now, but they get to her planet, and when they get there, they're suddenly set upon by Imperial TIE interceptors, not TIE fighters. TIE fighters are the normal ones with the flat wings in the center thing. These are the ones with the like concave, like they're like at an angle, almost looking like parentheses when you look straight up at it. And they're longer. They're like and they're pretty deadly. So they go into attack. As they're attacking, he's like, get me to my ship, I can help us, because there's like 4 or 5 of them. He jumps out of the ship. It's funny, he kind of like does this little drop out, goes down, and right before he gets to the thing, he activates his jetpack. It's the dopest landing. You want to talk about landing like a boss. Like he's like falling, backs up, lands, and just walks up to his thing, gets up, scurries in, gets in his thing, whatever. He takes off just as he's being, as they're attacking him there too. As they are defeating the ones that have attacked them, they notice all of a sudden, they see what looks like more attacks, but not toward them. They've attacked her castle. She effectively has now lost everything. Everything. Okay? So now he's gonna take them someplace safe. Cut to our title. Chapter 19, The Convert. Ooh. So after you get to that part, we then jump all the way to Coruscant. Now, what I really love about this episode is we get to spend practically an entire day or a period of time on Coruscant. Funny enough, I think this episode is probably more of Coruscant than we saw in almost all the prequels. I say that because we're actually living there. By that I mean, obviously in the prequels you see a lot of stuff, most of the first episode is spent on Tatooine and others, whatever. Anyway, so it's fun to see Coruscant like in its everyday style. This is also probably the first episode where I really felt like, and I'm hoping this isn't any kind of bias that I'm seeing in the media, I felt the presence of the volume. Now, normally that isn't as prevalent. The problem is what should have been at kind of volumetric lighting felt like they were in front of a screen. I don't know why, it wasn't jibing for me all the time. There were some other key parts where it totally works in this episode, but then there's some other parts where I'm sitting here going, I don't know, this feels awkward. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, are you guys really just running big fans because you have this train car thing and you're on the volume and you just need to make it look like you're traveling really fast? So the train car is designed to kind of just do this little sway move while at the same time they're blowing fans to the wind and I don't know. Anyway, whatever. Again, this is not a bad episode. There are elements that stuck out to me though. We see Dr. Pershing. Dr. Pershing's doing a talk, I guess the equivalent of a TED Talk in the New Republic. And you find out Dr. Pershing has been involved in what's called the Amnesty Program. Amnesty Program is exactly what I believe it sounds like. And you do they meet that out, which is everybody's been given, they've been giving I'm assuming letter designation, so like he's L52 or L42, L52, L42. Anyways, he's L52, I believe, and he being Dr. Pershing. Dr. Pershing, for those of you playing at home who haven't ever watched The Mandalorian, by the way, what are you doing here? He was the guy involved in the very beginning with Grogu and the whole bit and cloning, and he was there with, the original guy who hired Djarin and whatnot. So you sit here and you're introduced to this guy again. And you walk a day in his life, and there are some other former Imperial people, and they live in amnesty housing, and they wear specific outfits and the whole 9 yards. And you understand they're being rehabilitated, but not in prison. And he's living a pretty disparate life. He's not doing what he believes his calling is, which is scientific research, specifically into cloning research. He meets this female who I believe is G68 or either G68 or G36 or something like that. Anyway, she is a former pilot or communications officer, rather, not a pilot. She's a communications officer, and if obviously he's a former science officer. He's going through this existence, and they talk, and they're like, what do you miss the most? This and that. And while they're talking, he's like, I miss those yellow ration biscuits. And so they're like, oh, I can't believe whatever. Well, the next morning, those yellow ration biscuits have showed up at his doorstep. So we don't know who got him for him yet, but ultimately he's being groomed for something. And so ultimately he finds out that it was her, specifically because they're talking and stuff, and she asks him like, well, what's this and that, and he's like, well, I mean, the research I used to do, it could totally benefit them, but they don't want the Empire, or the New Republic doesn't want anything to do with former things of the Empire. And I get that. It's like, it's literally Nazi Germany. The Nazi, like, who wants anything the Nazis built? Like, really? And that's kind of where he's at, is like, but this is all perfectly good and useful, this whole thing, whatever. And so you find out that as they're talking, it turns out that the communications officer, G36, whatever, her name's Elia Kane. I'm not going to bury that later. I'm not going to try to keep myself from saying the name because I'm going to surprise you guys somehow. Her name's Elia Kane. She was a former communications officer for Moff Gideon on Moff Gideon's little offshoot ship, whatever. And she recognizes the science guy. She never recognizes Dr. Pershing. The whole idea is she seems to be pushing him toward something. And he goes toward wanting to continue his research, even if privately in the whatever. So he goes to these monitoring things, and he's asking the droid who's watching over him, it's like, hey, what, are we allowed, can I pursue in my own recreational time some of my former research? And she's like, your former research has been banned by the New Republic and the whole bit. He ultimately is not he's very disillusioned with life right now and wants a lot more. So what does he do? He goes to Elia and he says, yeah, let's do it. I want to do this thing. And she takes him on this whole little adventure. They barely escape some droids that are tickets please droids. And they ultimately get to where they're going, which is where everything's being decommissioned. And you see this giant area of the city, whatever the heck, where they're literally all these former Star Destroyers are being dismantled. And I would assume the technology is being reclaimed, raw materials are being turned to raw materials, actual technology is being reconverted and whatever, used for other stuff. And so that's when they begin to hear some stuff and they see lights. They eventually get out, and she's totally set him up. She is a New Republic, I don't want to say spy. Spy is the wrong word, but she's setting up these former people to see if they've truly converted. She's the convert from the episode. Okay. Right. And so then they are going to put him in this machine. And he recognizes it as former Imperial technology they called the Mind Flayer. And come to find out, this is technology that they would used to use to torture you. However, on very low settings, it can be used to enhance feelings of calm and make you feel better. It's got actual uses beyond the horrific, torturous ones that they were using it for. And that's when she's watching, because you find out the guy, there's this Imperial or New Republic guy. He's like, for every failure, there's a really good success like you. And he's all trusting her and whatnot. And she's like, no problem. He's like, I really care about him, my friend. I know he relapsed and whatnot, but I want to watch. So they leave. She turns the device up and he begins to get tortured. And so you don't know what her deal is. So clearly that's what I mean by this is a bridge episode. They're introducing new elements because they want to get us somewhere. Because I believe very clearly we're going to see these things collide. Okay? Now, we finally get back with Djarin. he's brought Bo-Katan to the culvert. The one from the first episode with the water source where he fought the big giant alligator turtle thing. And they arrive. Paz Vizsla's a dick, bro. What? Stop being a little I do not curse on this channel, but man, that frustrated me. I was like, dude. He's like, you're both apostates and blah, 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 and this and that, and I don't know what you do, blah, blah, blah. And so he's like, I've been redeemed. I've bathed in the waters of life of Mandalore, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. And he's like, we'll see. And he moves out of the way, and they go, and they see the armor. And sure enough, the armor is there, and she listens. She's like, all right. And she tests the water. It is indeed the waters of life. And he's like, you've been redeemed. And she looks over, and she says, by creed, so have you, Bo-Katan. And she's like, I'm sorry, what? What? And she's like, have you taken your helmet off since you bathed in them? She says, no. And she goes, okay. Then until such time as you leave us while you're here and you don't remove your helmet, you're one of us. And you're like, okay. All right. So now, what better way than to see, this is where I believe Jon Favreau is doing some double prong stuff. Because she could very well also be a convert, potentially, even if it's not intentional. She's technically a convert right now to the watch, children of the watch type situation. And so long as she keeps her helmet on, she's technically protected. And everyone immediately is like, hey, welcome, what's up, this and that. They're all, it's just a moment you're like, oh, okay. And sure enough, it's like, okay, and the episode ends. So there you go. Now you know. If knowing is half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. So what is the know-it-all index for this episode? Again, it's a bridge episode. I normally rate those really low. However, I did like this episode. I enjoyed it. I thought this was a very serviceable bridge episode in that they kept everything very interesting. I was curious why we were suddenly over in this other area, and now I realize it's either we have two converts being spoke about in the title here. The first, I believe, is Communications Officer Elias Kane, formerly of the Empire, now for the New Republic. And then the other convert, I believe, is Bo-Katan. Whether or not she stays that way, that's a whole nother thing. But either way, yeah, man, comment below. Let me know what you thought of the episode. I enjoyed it immensely. The know-it-all index for me is a 7.5. 7.5 out of 10. Again, it is not a bad episode. I do not want anybody interpreting like, oh, he must not have liked this episode. No, I love this episode. I think it's a very good episode. I think it's an excellent episode, in fact. So, yeah. All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.